Hey, my name's John. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, John.
Perfect. Extra coaching. Wow. Jack, fabulous job. You know, I just so proud of him. He, remember the first night I saw him at a meeting at Pass It On, and he was looking pretty rough. And he said he was looking for a sponsor or somebody, and I just, like I learned from Jeffrey, I could start, I don't know, I just kind of started getting a sense for the newcomer, and I just said, hey, I'm your sponsor. Let's do it. That was it. And he's been working the steps and doing his amends. God, just so gratifying. Anyways, I don't want to talk too much about my drunkalog other than, I started very young. And I took to it pretty quick, almost like a fish to water. And I think I had my first I started using drugs and alcohol probably around between 6 and 8. But I had my first real spiritual experience with alcohol around 12. And man, I just felt like that power come into me. And it just was electrifying. And I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is my solution, because I felt awkward and out of place. I couldn't really talk to people. And I was just not comfortable in my own skin. And alcohol gave me the ability to be comfortable in my own skin. And, I just, like anything I go all in. And it wasn't too long until I started getting into trouble, to the point where my mom decided to take me to a treatment center for the first time. And I went to, it was called Care Unit back then, over in Kirkland. And, I was a real chameleon. And I convinced everybody that I was going to be the one to make it. And they were all sure I was going to make it out of all of them. I was the first one drunk. My buddy had a fake ID from Hawaii. We went to Pizza and Pipes, and that was it. So, and it just got progressively worse. I started getting in more trouble. I too had sexual abuse when I was a kid, and so alcohol and drugs really gave me maybe just forget about all that and just push it down and just be comfortable in my own skin. And that's what I really wanted. And I could not, I couldn't figure out how to do it without alcohol and drugs. And once it had its hooks into me like that, I was just, and I did some geographicals, joined the military, learned how to drink like a professional in the military. Went to war, came back really crazy. And I remember some buddies of mine in college, they're like, yeah, we're smoking crack now. And I'm like, crack? I'm like, fuck, you guys are crazy. And 2 weeks later, man, I'm down there with them doing the same thing, and I was an opportunist from the get-go. I was a liar, cheater, and thief before I ever picked up any alcohol or drugs. I tell the story about when I was playing Candyland with my mom, and she went out of the room, and I switched the pieces around so I could start winning. And I don't know. So I got out of the military, and I tried to stay sober in there. That didn't work out. I got back after Desert Storm, and man, I just was, I don't know. I didn't realize how bad I was, but I was really I didn't realize what an impact the war had made on me. And I just hit the booze and the drugs harder. And I I don't know what to say. It just got worse and worse and worse, you know. And I was introduced to AA when I went through treatment center the first time, um, and I just didn't think I was ready. I mean, I was barely 16, and it was back in the old. This is back in the 80s, man, and like kids coming into AA was not a thing. You know, that hadn't really happened yet, at least where I was. And I just, you know, I was looking for the differences instead of the similarities, you know, and old timers would be like, Jesus, kid, what are you doing here? You know, and I'd be like, oh, well, you know, I was told I was supposed to come here. They're like, okay, you know, but I don't know, I didn't want to stop. So I just stopped going to meetings. And I got kicked out of the house several times. I was homeless. I was living in an abandoned house when I was in high school. Um, but I was still trying to go to school because I was still trying to maintain, you know, I was more interested in saving my face than my ass. Uh, and I didn't graduate high school on time. I had to go back and finish up another quarter at Nathan Hale High School. Um, and like I said, kind of going all around. But this is my third real attempt at sobriety. My sobriety date is 6/11/2021. And although there's a lot of times I came in and out, I wasn't really serious. When I came in this last time, I had quit my job that AA had allowed me to get. Um, because of AA, I was able to go back to school. I was able to get a degree in surgical technology, and I got a job in labor and delivery, um, doing C-sections and such. And life was good. I got married after about 3 years of sobriety, and around year 10, I had lost my sponsor, like basically fired him because I had control in my life again, you know, like A giving me this stuff. And so like I can take it from here. And I need to be a better husband, and I need to focus on my marriage and my work instead of the program. And eventually I just stopped going to meetings. Marijuana was legal now. And I decided that I didn't really have a problem with marijuana. And so I tried the marijuana maintenance program. And I realized that this was going to start interfering with my work and patient safety. And so I gave my notice to my work on good terms. And my wife and I moved to Mexico, where she's from. And and then COVID hit. And I lasted about a year without drinking. And then about 1 year to the day almost, someone offered me a drink, and I said, sure, why not? And then it was off to the races again, you know. And I tried to hide it from my wife. Um, and eventually I hit this spiritual bottom that I just had never hit a bottom like that before. And it was the worst thing about these spiritual bottoms is that there's no alcohol and drugs that can touch that pain. And I attempted suicide several times before in my past, and I started thinking about it again, and I didn't want to die like that, and so I reached out to a friend up in the States, and they got me some numbers for a Zoom meeting, and that's where I found my temporary sponsor there in a Zoom meeting, and he just started having me do the basics, you know. Um, and that was I get up in the morning, I make my bed, uh, I say a prayer, and I say three things that I'm grateful for. And that was the foundation I needed to start, um, you know, kind of trying to rebuild my life. And I realized that something was lacking from my program and all the other attempts that I'd made is that I had no spiritual program. I just thought this was something I could fake it until I make it kind of thing. And for me, that didn't work. Um, so, like Jeffrey said, I'd managed to get my old job back because I left on good terms. Um, and I came back up and I started going to Pass It On, which was my original home group. Um, and yeah, I was still working with the sponsor, you know, he was in Mexico, I was up in here. And he's like, listen, man, you need to get a real sponsor. You need to get like one in person you can meet with. And so I'm like, okay. And like Jeffrey was talking about, he had his whole spiel at the meeting, you know, he's like, hey, if you want to, I want to work with you. If you want to work the program and you want to get through it and you want to have freedom. And he had the whole thing, man. And I'm like, that sounds pretty good. And then I actually believed him when he told me we get through the steps in 3 months. I was like, you know, but what really I appreciate about Jeffrey is that he seemed genuinely interested in working with me. And that's all I needed. I needed somebody that had more faith in me or than me getting sober than I did in myself, because I had none at that point. You know, I'm the guy that would have everything together and all my ducks in a row, and then I would just take a left turn for no reason at all and decide to start drinking and drugging again. So I had no faith in myself. And so I just put it all on Jeffrey. And he just said, hey, show up, do this and this. And he had structure, he had enthusiasm, and he generally seemed to be grateful that I was in his presence. And man, it just, you know, when we come in and somebody reaches out a hand to us, you know, for the first time, I mean, it feels so good because the world is a cold, cold place when I'm out there drinking and drugging. And when I burned all my bridges and all the people that tried to help me and love me and I told them to fuck off, you know, all that was gone and there's nothing left. And that's one of the beautiful things about the program is that it's so welcoming. And I'm a very skeptical person. I'm not a religious person. I have a strong spiritual belief these days in God. You know, but as far as religion goes, I'm always looking for what do they really want? What do they really want out of me? You know, behind the smiles and the hugs and all that bullshit. And I found that they didn't want anything, but they just wanted me to succeed and to stay sober, and just amazing. I used to hate this program. I never wanted to be part of it. And that was one of the problems for me, is that I always would come into meetings late. I would leave early. I would never really get to talk to anybody. And so I stayed safe. So I thought, but I was also disconnected from other people and myself. And AA and God allowed me to bridge that gap, and have a host of friends these days. I'm not a social butterfly, but I have some really good people in my life from this program, people that I would do anything for, and that I believe when the chips are down would do anything for me. And in fact, they've proven that. And I believe that, you know, working the steps with the sponsor, and going to meetings, and then eventually working with others, is just crucial. And for me, the miracles started happening at the ninth step when I really had to make amends and eat that crow and finally take responsibility for my life. Because up until that point, it was everybody else's fault but mine. I was a victim, I've been molested, I've been abused, your parents and adults, and I just had all these things, and I was just one big sob story. And I realized and I learned early that victims don't recover. And that was really hard pill to swallow because I realized that I had created almost all the trouble in my life. And I finally had to take responsibility for that. And what a freeing moment that was. You know, I've had the opportunity to work with other alcoholics, and some have stayed sober, some haven't. My sponsor taught me that it's not my responsibility to keep people sober. And if they want to do the steps and they want to do the work, then you give them all you got. But if they don't, you got to cut them loose because there's other alcoholics out there who need our help. And that was a really hard lesson for me to learn because there's a lot of we're good people. When we're not drinking and drugging, we are generally hardworking, intelligent, and loving individuals who are just looking for a way back. Um, and I truly believe that. And I think the greeter position is one of the best positions out there because you get to see the newcomer for the first time as they're walking through the door, and you get to be that hand that reaches out for them, as people did for me. Um, when I had to, or when I got my first year coin, and an old timer said, "Your first year is free." I'm like, "You, man." I'm like, what does that even mean? Now I understand it, because basically people carried me for that first year, you know, and and then I realized that those people still cared about me, but they pulled back because there's other people that they needed to work with, and so I always tell that to people in their first year. Yeah, your first year is free, and they give me the same look that I gave the other guy, you know. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I left out about my past, but I guess it really doesn't matter. What matters is today, and that this program has given me a life that I could have never imagined, and it's helping me to become the person I've always wanted to be. And the greatest gift out of all of it was that I was introduced to a higher power of my understanding, to a God of my understanding. And it's something that is absolutely sacred to me and that has changed me fundamentally inside without me doing it a thing. It's grace. It's grace. And yeah, I've done the work, but it's really God's grace that I'm here today, and that I'm healthy, happy. And I went through a divorce. I'd been married to my wife. My dad had retired down to Mexico, and I was visiting him when I was going to school, and that's how I met my wife at the time. He was building his house, and I stayed at a hotel, and she was working at that hotel. And I barely had 3 years at the time. And it was kind of one of those storybook things, I'm a real romantic and a sucker like that. And so I heard her singing in the kitchen. I couldn't even see her. And I said, I'm going to marry that girl. And I just got out of a really super toxic relationship in AA, like really bad. Um, and so that was the last thing I was looking for. But yeah, 6 months, we got married 6 months later, and we were married for 13 years, a little over that. And we ended up getting divorced officially in August. And one of the hardest things I ever had to do. But I was able to go through it with some dignity and some love. And I definitely got the short end of the stick on that. But because of this program, I was able to be kind, even though I didn't feel like being kind. I was able to be kind and compassionate. And I wasn't just thinking about me like I normally would. And I really wanted her to be taken care of. I didn't know how much I don't know, how much she wanted that she needed to be taken care of, but it was more than I was thinking. And so, but you know what? I can sleep well tonight knowing that I did the right thing, and I still have a cordial relationship with her. We didn't have any kids, but we do have fur babies, a lot of rescues down in Mexico. And so I have visitation rights for them. That was like the only thing I got really. But I did it all sober. And it really helped me to lean into my higher power. And I was just surrendering. Like there's this guy that I listen to, his name's Tom B. He's an AA speaker, and he's talking about emotional sobriety. And he said there'll be surrenders beyond surrenders. And I didn't know what he meant at the time until I started going through it myself. But I didn't have to do it alone. I had my friends in the program. They supported me and checked in with me. Great sponsorship, and everybody just came together to help me out. And that's what this, it's one of the most beautiful things about this program is that we're here for each other, you know. And I guess, I don't know if I have too much more to say other than that. Other than I would like to reiterate how proud I am of Jack. The guy is really doing his work. He does everything I ask him to do. He shows up on time. He got a service position as a coffee maker. And he's learned some lessons along the way about you can either do it the old way of doing it by yourself, or you can ask for help. And what happens when you don't ask for help and you try and do it your own way? Things don't always work out, you know, as we all learn. I mean, my gosh, I don't do this program perfect by any stretch of the imagination. The only difference today is that I love this program. I see the power that it has in people's lives when they choose to do the work. And I got this from Jeffrey, is that I'm one of these people, I need to work the steps every year. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish I could have just be one and done, and I could just call it good. But for me, my alcoholism and my addiction are constantly doing push-ups. And I've got this inner Homer Simpson that I have to choke out every once in a while because he starts getting out of hand. And I have to do, because I can live in 10, 11, and 12, which I do. but I still need to do my fifth step with another person. And there's things that I thought I'd taken care of that are still there. And going through the steps for me, it actually has helped me to see a pattern that I couldn't see before. And certainly not when I was drinking, because I was a binge user, and I could have months or a year sometimes of sobriety, not happy sobriety. I was fucking like white knuckling it, but anyways, I lost my train of thought. So I guess I'll wrap up with this, and I'll say that I'm comfortable in my own skin today. I love who I am. I'm proud of myself. I'm going back to school to get my RN degree this winter. And a beautiful lady by my side. And the world is just, it's an oyster, man, and it's just waiting. And I'm so excited to dive into it. And as long as I stay sober, and as long as I keep willing to do the work and work with others, I've got a pretty good shot. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. I'm going to keep coming back. Thank you. Thanks.